The wedding hall fell silent when the homeless young bride walked toward the 54-year-old billionaire. Guests whispered, cameras flashed, and many mocked her torn past. But just before the vows, she stopped, turned around, and did something no one expected. She took the microphone, called 3 homeless children from the street, and placed them beside her. "Today," she said through tears, "I am not only receiving a family, I am giving one." In that moment, even the billionaire could not hold back his tears. Rain fell heavily over New York City. Under a bridge, 23-year-old Emma wrapped her thin coat around herself. She had no family, no home, and no certainty about tomorrow. Yet she still shared half of her bread with an elderly woman beside her. "Kindness is the only thing poverty cannot steal," Emma whispered. Across the street, a black limousine slowed as billionaire Daniel Carter quietly watched her from inside. Daniel Carter was 54, one of the richest businessmen in America. He owned hotels, companies, and private jets, but his mansion felt painfully empty. After losing his wife years earlier, he spent most evenings alone. That night, he could not forget the homeless girl sharing her food. Something about her compassion reminded him of the life he once had before wealth became more important than human connection. The next morning, Daniel returned to the bridge carrying coffee and sandwiches. Emma looked surprised. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Daniel smiled softly. "Because yesterday, you helped someone when you had almost nothing." Emma accepted the food but kept her dignity. She thanked him politely and refused the envelope of cash he offered. Her honesty impressed him more than any business deal ever had. Over the following weeks, Daniel visited often. They talked about books, dreams, and regrets. Emma revealed that she had once studied nursing before medical bills and family tragedy left her homeless. Daniel listened carefully. Unlike others, he did not pity her. He respected her strength. For the first time in years, Daniel found himself looking forward to each day simply to hear Emma's voice. One evening, Daniel invited Emma to dinner at a small restaurant instead of an expensive hotel. Emma hesitated but agreed. She was nervous among elegantly dressed customers, yet Daniel treated her as an equal. They laughed together for hours. When the waiter brought the bill, Emma insisted on paying for her tea. Daniel realized she valued self-respect more than comfort, and his admiration grew deeper. News of their meetings spread quickly. Social media exploded with criticism. A billionaire dating a homeless woman? People mocked. Daniel's business partners warned him that his reputation could suffer. Emma heard the comments and decided to stop seeing him. "Your world and mine are too different," she said sadly. But Daniel replied, "The world measures money. I measure the heart." Months later, Daniel surprised Emma with an extraordinary proposal. In a quiet park, he knelt beside a fountain and held out a simple ring. "I have spent years surrounded by luxury but starving for kindness," he told her. "Will you marry me?" Emma stared at him in disbelief. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "Yes, if we promise never to forget where I came from." The engagement shocked the nation. Television hosts debated their relationship. Some accused Emma of chasing money, while others defended her character. Emma remained silent and continued volunteering at a shelter whenever possible. Daniel noticed that she still spent time with homeless children, sharing meals and helping them with homework. Her actions convinced him that she had never changed despite the sudden attention. As the wedding approached, luxury designers offered Emma expensive gowns and jewelry. She accepted a beautiful dress but declined most of the diamonds. "I don't need millions around my neck," she said. "I need peace in my heart." The designers were stunned. Meanwhile, Daniel secretly arranged scholarships for several homeless youths after hearing Emma speak passionately about education and opportunity. The wedding day arrived at a grand hotel ballroom overlooking Central Park. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above hundreds of wealthy guests. Cameras from around the world waited eagerly. Emma stood in a private room, holding a small envelope close to her chest. Her makeup artist noticed her trembling. "Are you afraid?" she asked. Emma shook her head. "I'm about to do something very important." Daniel waited at the altar wearing a tailored black suit. Despite his success, he felt more nervous than during any business negotiation. Guests whispered as the doors opened. Emma entered, looking radiant in her white gown. Yet many people noticed that her bouquet contained simple wildflowers instead of rare imported roses. She had picked them herself that morning near the shelter where she once slept. The ceremony began beautifully. The officiant spoke about love, resilience, and second chances. But when it was time for the vows, Emma suddenly raised her hand. "Before I marry Daniel," she said, "I need to ask for a few minutes." Confused murmurs filled the ballroom. Daniel nodded gently, trusting her completely. Emma walked away from the altar toward the entrance of the hall. To everyone's surprise, Emma returned with 3 homeless children she knew from the streets. Their clothes were clean but modest. The youngest girl held Emma's hand tightly. Guests stared in disbelief. Some photographers lowered their cameras, unsure what was happening. Daniel's eyes widened as Emma guided the children to the front of the ballroom and placed them beside her. Emma took the microphone. Her voice trembled at first. "A year ago, I had no home, no family, and no hope," she said. "These children shared food with me when I was hungry. They comforted me when I cried." The room became silent. Even the critics who had doubted her listened carefully as tears began forming in Emma's eyes. She continued, "Today I am marrying a man who gave me dignity instead of pity. But I cannot walk into this new life while pretending my past no longer exists." Emma turned toward the children. "I promised them that if my life ever changed, theirs would change too." Daniel pressed a hand over his mouth, already struggling to control his emotions. Emma opened the envelope she had carried all morning. Inside were legal documents. "Daniel and I have agreed to create a foundation for homeless children," she announced. "The first scholarships and housing support begin today." Gasps spread through the ballroom. The children looked confused until Emma knelt beside them and explained that they would finally have safe places to live. The youngest girl burst into tears and hugged Emma tightly. Guests who had arrived expecting a glamorous celebrity wedding suddenly found themselves witnessing something deeply human. Several people in the audience began crying openly. Daniel stepped forward and embraced the children as well. In that moment, the billionaire looked less like a powerful businessman and more like a grateful father. One of Daniel's wealthy partners quietly wiped his eyes. Earlier, he had warned Daniel not to marry Emma. Now he realized how wrong he had been. Around the ballroom, guests lowered their phones and simply watched. The atmosphere changed completely. What began as a spectacle had become a reminder that compassion can transform even the most luxurious room into a place of genuine love. Emma turned back to Daniel. "I don't want a wedding remembered for diamonds," she said softly. "I want a wedding remembered because someone's life became better." Daniel took her hands and replied, "You have already made my life better." His voice cracked with emotion. The officiant paused, allowing the couple a moment while many guests continued wiping away tears. When the vows resumed, Daniel spoke from the heart. "I built companies worth billions," he said, "but today you taught me the true meaning of wealth." Emma smiled through tears. "And you taught me that being seen is more valuable than being rescued." Their words echoed through the silent ballroom, touching people who had spent years chasing success without understanding fulfillment. After they exchanged rings, the audience stood and applauded for several minutes. The applause was not for luxury or status. It was for generosity, courage, and humility. Reporters who had prepared gossip headlines began rewriting their stories. Emma hugged the children again while Daniel promised them that this was only the beginning of their new future together. During the reception, Emma requested that part of the wedding budget be donated to local shelters. Instead of extravagant fireworks, she asked for warm meals to be delivered across the city that evening. Daniel happily agreed. The catering staff worked with volunteers to prepare hundreds of food packages. News of the gesture spread quickly beyond the ballroom walls. An elderly homeless man received one of the meals that night. When he learned it came from Emma's wedding, he smiled and said, "She hasn't forgotten us." Similar stories appeared throughout the city. People who had never met Emma felt inspired by her actions. Donations to shelters increased dramatically within days, and volunteers began signing up in record numbers. Back at the reception, Daniel danced with Emma beneath the chandeliers. "You changed this wedding," he told her. Emma shook her head gently. "No, we changed it together." The children joined them on the dance floor, laughing freely. Guests who had once judged Emma now asked how they could support the new foundation. A movement was beginning before their eyes. Weeks later, the Carter Foundation opened its first housing center for homeless families. Emma personally welcomed the residents. She remembered every fear she had once carried on the streets. Daniel watched proudly as she spoke with children, helped mothers settle into rooms, and encouraged teenagers to continue their education. Her past had become a source of strength rather than shame. Television interviews followed, but Emma rarely discussed the luxury of married life. Instead, she spoke about homelessness, dignity, and opportunity. "People don't need pity," she said. "They need a chance." Her words resonated across different countries. Donations arrived from around the world, and other business leaders began funding similar programs in their own communities. One evening, Daniel asked Emma if she regretted anything. She looked at the city lights from their balcony and answered, "I regret that so many people suffer alone. But I don't regret the road that brought me here." Daniel admitted that before meeting her, he believed success was measured by profit. Now he measured it by the number of lives they could help. The 3 children from the wedding thrived in their new home. The youngest girl started school for the first time. The oldest boy dreamed of becoming an architect. Whenever reporters visited, they proudly called Emma "our sister." Their happiness became one of the most powerful symbols of the foundation's mission and the reason Daniel and Emma worked tirelessly every day. On their first wedding anniversary, Daniel and Emma returned to the bridge where they had first met. Emma carried fresh bread and coffee. Together they shared food with people living there. Daniel looked around and said, "This is where my life truly changed." Emma smiled. "Mine too." They stood quietly in the rain, grateful for a beginning that once seemed impossible. As they walked away hand in hand, Emma looked back at the bridge and whispered, "No one should be invisible." Daniel squeezed her hand, understanding the promise behind those words. Their marriage had started with headlines about wealth and homelessness, but the world remembered it for something far greater, a bride who used her wedding day to give hope to others. True wealth is not measured by money, but by the lives we touch. Emma had nothing, yet she shared what little she had. Daniel had everything, yet he felt empty until he discovered compassion. Their wedding became unforgettable not because of luxury, but because they chose to lift others up. Kindness, dignity, and generosity can change hearts, communities, and even the world.